This week on BSD Now, we have all sorts of interesting news, including a kernel fuzzing audit done for OpenBSD, a much improved C client for LetsEncrypt, an interview with Dru Lavigne, and much more. Stick around for your place to be, SD. BSD Now, episode 151, Fuzzy Auditing, recorded July 20th, 2016. Hey, I'm your host, Chris Moore.
And I'm Alan Jude.
And we're glad to have you with us this week. We got an exciting episode, a lot of good stories to talk about. Changing it up a little bit this week, though we don't have an interview for this week. So, oh darn, we'll have to talk about a whole bunch of extra stories and stuff. But let that be a lesson to you. Maybe some of you have been putting off doing an interview. You may want to schedule us for a future week, just knowing that we have some openings. So we'll be glad to get you on a future episode of a show. Let us know. Of course, we'll give you all that contact info at the end. So we'll make you wait. But if you're a longtime listener, you already know what it is. You could email us right now. But let's hop right into the headlines here. So actually, it's more like Patch Wednesday. But if you've been watching the mailing list, like maybe last Thursday, either way, a whole bunch of bugs were found in the OpenBSD kernel, which is always good to see getting patched. Specifically, Jesse Hertz and Tim Newsom, part of the NCC group calling themselves Project Triforce, have been working with the OpenBSD team to try and fix some newly discovered bugs in the kernel using fuzzy. So that's pretty cool. But they were able to track down quite a few things. I was surprised to see this many, and personally, I hope it means they're going to do this on other BSDs as well. But looks like some of the list in order of severity, I think, is how they ranked these. But they listed some of the things they discovered. First up was an mmap panic, where a malicious call to mmap can trigger an allocation panic or trigger memory corruption. So that's, of course,
that's a big one because lots of user space programs do that. So it's usually something that's allowed easily. And
Yep. And then next up was a K-event panic, where any user could panic the kernel with the K-event system call. I can see how that would be
annoying. That's again something that's designed to be used from user space and so isn't really privileged.
Let's see, a thread sleep panic. Any user could panic the kernel with the thread sleep system call. That's another one that needs to be fixed. And then thread signal divert panic. Any user can panic the kernel with thread signal divert system call. And then next up was a UFS that looks like getDents panic. Any user can panic the kernel with the get...
I think it's get directory entries.
Get directory entries. Oh, okay. That's good to know. That makes sense. That's a UFS one. So they could panic the system with that as well.
I wonder if that one exists on FreeBSD because UFS is common. Although the UFS on OpenBSD is a lot older, but it
doesn't mean if we have
it's all the same heritage.
A long time. Yeah. Next up was a mount panic. So a root user or user on the system with a current user mount set to true can trigger a kernel panic when mounting a tempfs file system. So ouch. That's a good one to get fixed. And then last, something similar, unmount panic, where a root user again or a user on the system, if you have current user mount set to true, could also trigger a kernel panic when unmounting a file system. And then it looks like something similar with tempfs make node panic as well. So root can panic the kernel with make node on a tempfs file system. So it looks like quite a few things they found with their fuzzing algorithm here. That's pretty cool to see that they were able to dig those all up. It sounds like I think already they're starting to get all these patched.
Yeah, I think they waited to post this until they were all patched.
Okay, so that's good. That's good to see. But we have a link to the NCC's group, the full results of that, if you'd like to take a look at it as well and see kind of how this was done and what they uncovered. And I think they even included proof of concepts for all these as well. So you could try and simulate it to see what it did. But this is really good work. And this is the kind of important thankless stuff that a lot of people just kind of overlook. So I think it's really cool to see groups starting to tackle some of this. And of course, we'd like to see work like this done on all the BSDs as well to see if we can expose vulnerabilities. And not only that, get rid of more kernel panics. It's always a good thing because you have to wonder how many of these are being hit by accident out there. Where it's like once in a blue moon I lock up or have a panic. Well, maybe it was one of these guys. So it's good to see these things getting solved.
But so if you check out the errata page over at OpenBSD, you can see a huge number of patches here for July 14th, including there's some unrelated to this fuzz testing, like splice sockets in a loop can cause a kernel spin. some FD passing stuff, UFS reader failing to limit size of memory allocation leads to a panic, and erase occurs in the unlocking of the ARP input path can lead to a kernel null dereference, and some other vulnerabilities that were in there as well.
Okay, good stuff. Next up here, we have an article about running CockroachDB in a FreeBSD jail. So I had to take a little bit of a closer look at this, but it looks like the developers themselves behind CockroachDB have written up a nice walkthrough of getting their software to run inside FreeBSD jails, which they open up with manually encapsulating CockroachDB using Linux C groups is no easy task, which is why tools like Docker exist in the first place. By comparison, running server processes natively in FreeBSD jails is straightforward and robust. So that's good to see that they kind of admit up front this works pretty good. But the walkthrough is actually pretty cool. It talks about how to compile CockroachDB straight from source. It looks like a port is pending as well, which will take a few of the initial steps out of here. But that itself is not too difficult. It looks like they rely mostly on Bash, Git, and Gmake, and of course Go. So if you can package install those 4 things, compiling the product won't be that difficult. Once the compile's finished, of course, to run it, they talk about you'll need linprocfs, although they do make note that may be going away in the future. They said, note the Linux compatibility files, packages, and libraries are not needed further. However, CockroachDB uses Linux procfs to inspect system properties via their Go Sigger, I guess. I'm not sure. That's some Go thing. If when that evolves to read FreeBSD properties natively, CockroachDB will not need linprocfs anymore.
Yeah.
So somebody needs to port that.
Yeah, that'd be good just because the linprocfs we expose is missing a lot of stuff and is a little more basic. Although, I'm sure that's on the list of things to be improved as we work on our Linux compatibility. But if we can avoid it, it'd be better to teach programs how to get that data properly on FreeBSD. So yeah, it's, if you're one of those people that want to get started with Go, it's probably fairly simple to do things like, if you want this property as FreeBSD, use this CCTL or whatever instead of, so it'd be a fairly good starter project for somebody that's familiar with Go but hasn't done much with it yet, maybe. Or if you want to use this, then you would have some impetus to work on the Go code for that as well.
Definitely good stuff. So, of course, from here, the tutorial kind of went forward, talking about now that the initial setup was complete and they have a compiled Go binary. The walkthrough then took us through the process of creating an rc.d script, which obviously will be included with a port when that shows up. And then ultimately, they set up with an easy jail and deployed CockroachDB within. So that's actually kind of the easy part.
Yeah.
And as they pointed out, a lot easier than doing C groups, which is why people rely on tools like Docker, because that is somewhat complicated. But what's really cool about this, the word's starting to get out about jails, their functionality, which is ironic because jails have been around forever.
Yeah, they're literally like
longer than all these other
15 years now.
Yeah, they predate all these other things. So it's good to see that more projects are now starting to get some awareness of jails and also providing walkthroughs and trying to support FreeBSD natively. So kudos to the CockroachDB team for tackling this. And hopefully you guys get your port in soon. That'll make this a lot easier, take away at least those first couple steps. Okay, so moving on, I guess you have something here about user mount bugs. So what's going on there?
So as we heard in the very first story, if you have the kern.user mount turned on OpenBSD, then the fuzzing found that you can panic the kernel. Normally that's restricted, only root can do it, but if the user mount flag is set, then a regular user can do it. So kern.user mount, or on FreeBSD it's called vfs.user mount, is a CCTL that can be enabled to allow an unprivileged user to mount file systems. It can be very useful for allowing a non-root user to, say, mount a USB stick or a CD or other external media.
We have to have that on for PCBSD by default, for example, just because otherwise you don't run X as root, you're logged in as a user. But it's still nice to plug in a USB stick.
And not have to, use sudo to be able to mount it or whatever. But, it's so while it's very, very useful, it's not without its dangers. And so in the commit here, basically, while they patched most of the other vulnerabilities from the NCC fuzz testing, they said for this one, kern.user mount equals 1 is unsafe for everyone since it allows any non-pledged program to call the mount or unmount system calls. There's no way any user can be expected to keep their system safe and reliable with this feature. Therefore, setting it to 1 is now ignored, and after the release of OpenBSD 6.0, we'll delete the sysctl entirely. So in OpenBSD 6.0 and forward, setting this will no longer do anything, and you'll need root privileges in order to mount a file system. They say, however, because if there is a bug in the file system driver, a user could potentially exploit that and root the system. So in this case, I think it only caused a panic. But if they found a different bug by exploiting a bug in a file system driver or something, they might also be able to get root privileges, right? So it can be a security problem.
So what happens if you still want users to mount file systems? Then you give them
have to use sudo or do as. And yeah, at that point, then.
But does that not expose the same potential vulnerability again? Like they're running something as root, which could have a bug.
The one difference there is that when the user mount flag is set, any user can mount any file system. With do as, you could restrict which devices they could run the command on, and also say only these 2 users or something.
So there's some risk management you could do there to try and mitigate a little bit of that. Okay.
It seems like maybe the user mount flag on FreeBSD could be modified to make you have to be in the operators group or something to lock it down a little bit so that it wasn't all users or no users.
We do that with our DevFS rules. So if you're in the operators group, you can now user mount certain things there. Like
user mount sticks wouldn't apply if you can't read the dev note. As I explain later in the story, the only place I've ever really used this is with ZFS. And so it's a little different there. So the other note they had here, in addition to the patched bugs, several panics were discovered by NCC that can be triggered by root or users with the user mount option set. These bugs are not getting patched because we believe they are only the tip of the iceberg. The mount system call exposes too much code to user land to be considered secure. So this is their very pragmatic way of dealing with this issue. It's not really possible to be sure that every bug has been fixed in the whole mount system call setup. And so they will just lock that feature down so only root can do it so that it can't be exploited by anyone else. So I can understand why they did that, although as you pointed out, that can be a downside for, especially since on OpenBSD is the only version of X that doesn't require some root privileges to run, right? So, I don't know.
I can see their way of doing it. At least makes some sense. Like you said, you can restrict certain users can mount certain devices, right? And like I said, I kind of do the same thing with DevFS rules already. Or if you're not in operators, you don't have access to any mounting at all. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you're still going to provide a method for somebody to run something as root, which seems like you could still expose some of the same issues.
But they're basically they decided that if you're root, then it's not worth spending all the time going through the mount system call and making sure there's no other bugs left there. And removing the user mount option just removes the attack surface and lets them basically be done with it now instead of having to spend a bunch of time on it. Because even if they spent, a whole bunch of time on it and cleaned it up a bunch, they can never be sure there aren't any bugs,
still not confident. Yeah, they cannot guarantee 100% confidence in this, which I understand, and I respect that.
Yep. So they're just removing that feature. So as I said, I use the facility on FreeBSD extensively with the ZFS permission delegation. So ZFS allow Chris receive, and that allows Chris to send ZFS snapshots to my server. And one of those options, obviously, to receive something, you have to be able to create, and to create, you have to be able to mount. So that user mount is required in order to actually let Chris, mount the data set after he sends it to me so that it's served by the server. And so, I use it to allow non-root users to create and mount new ZFS datasets and do replication without requiring root access. So I have a script that's connecting between 2 servers and doing the replication, and not having to use root or sudo on either end is a very big feature for me.
That's how Life Preserver does its backups. So you can SSH in, of course, not as root, and then do your backup.
And there are some safety belts, like you said, with the DevFS rules, you can ensure that users can't access certain device nodes. And also, it has a safety belt so that the user must own the directory that they're mounting the file system to, so that they can't just mount a new file system as, say, /etc, which has a new password file that lets them SSH in as root or something.
That's right.
But, it might be worth looking at additional things that we've done to lock down that a little bit anyway. But yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay, so next up in the news here, we're going to have to file this one under the category of it's about time. But Christops, who we've interviewed in the past, has released some software up on his website for interacting with LetsEncrypt, which I think is freaking fantastic. But I'll just read you the header for the project site, which kind of sums up what it is really nicely. He says, first of all, be upfront about security. OpenSSL is known to have issues. You can't trust what comes down the pipe, and your private key's integrity is a hard requirement. Not a situation where you can be careless. Encrypt is a client for LetsEncrypt users, but one designed for security. No Python, no Ruby, no Bash. A straightforward open source implementation in C that isolates each step of the sequence. You have no idea how happy it made me to see this
well,
get posted.
I did a LetsEncrypt certificate for BSDNow.tv for the first time yesterday as part of our server migration stuff because I wanted that to be the default site instead of my old blog if people arrive over SSL but aren't supposed to or whatever. And I was surprised with the crappiness of some of the clients. Like, you go to the LetsEncrypt page and they're just like, we're just punting on this. It's like, so we have this crazy thing in Python, or you can use this silly thing in Bash, or here, use this website that does it all and claims they don't steal your key. It's like, how do they allow that one?
Yeah, I must say, so the service is great. I love LetsEncrypt. I'm using it for a bunch of sites here, right? But the client left a lot to be desired.
Yeah, well,
I did the Python one initially and was like, that's horrible.
The one of the bigger ones that got me was like, I tried using the Bash one because I figured it was smallest and it was easy. But I didn't want to run it from the web server. Like, my architecture for my web server is a little weird, and there's no shell on the thing where the code for the web server executes, and so it's like it wanted to create the file and let LetsEncrypt get it all in sequence and not like in steps. It's like, tell me the files, let me go create it for you, and then you verify it. But the script doesn't have an option to wait. It's just like, oh no, I wrote the file to the directory based on where your current working directory is, and I couldn't access it over the website, so nope. The other thing I found is LetsEncrypt. I don't know about all the clients, but I found it relatively difficult to make the certificate signing request where you could do the multiple host names things, the SAN, because I wanted it to be BSDNow.tv and www.bsdnow.tv. Sure. And that's the OpenSSL command line client for CSR generation does not make that easy.
No, not at all. Not at all.
And the clients I tried didn't help. It was I had less fun than I should have setting that up.
It should be a lot easier, right? Because they're rolling it out as free SSL for everyone. We want everyone to do SSL, but it is the client's a little frustrating.
Yeah.
So, but what makes this so attractive is the isolation bits. Like, hey, somebody's kind of doing this right. It's in C. So you may ask specifically, what does it isolate? Well, right now it's actually broken down into 6 isolated steps. So step 1 is going to be a read and parse an account and domain private key. Step 2, it does is authenticate with the LetsEncrypt server. Step 3 is authorize each domain listed for the certificate. Step 4 is submit the X509 request. Step 5 is receive and serialize the signed X509 certificate. And step 6 is request, receive, and serialize the certificate chain from the issuer. So it's nice to see that he kind of brings the whole OpenBSD philosophy to it, right? Privilege separation, and it doesn't have any dependencies aside from LibreSSL too, which made me also have some warm fuzzies. Like, oh, that's good. Yep. So good to see. But I don't know about you guys, but I'm going to be switching over one of my systems this weekend to give this guy a whirl and see how it works, because it can't be any more painful than the other client I'm using at the moment.
Although for me, it was slightly more complicated in that my custom Poudriere build is all set up with OpenSSL, not LibreSSL, and so I can't just install LibreSSL to use this. So the first one I tried to use was LetsEncrypt, but I couldn't have it side by side with the SSL I already had. So then I had to try something else, and then it was terrible, and I was like, oh my, come on.
If only we should make LibreSSL the default. Oh wait, PCBSD does that. No, well, this is a good one though. I'm glad to see this. So encourage more people to try this out. And thanks, Christops, for doing this. This is fantastic work. Okay, we're going to head into the news roundup in just a moment. But before we do, of course, DigitalOcean is up first this week. So, of course, the website for that is going to be digitalocean.com, where you can go and get signed up. And so you're asking, well, wait, you didn't put a slash tag at the end of that saying BSD Now or whatever, right? How do you guys get credit knowing that they heard about it here? So the trick with that is when you create your DigitalOcean account, if you're a first-time user and you've not used any of the coupon codes, you can use the coupon code FreeBSDNow. Apply that, and that'll give you a $10 credit, which, I mean, that's good for running 2 months of their lower-end VM, which is, for a low-end VM, is still pretty stinking beefy. It's all backed by SSDs, terabyte of transfer a month. You get to pick and choose from what operating system you want in it. So, of course, they have all the variety of different Linuxes, FreeBSDs installed, available out of box. If you'd like to throw Open or Net or Dragon in there, you can do that too. They have a nice HTML5 based web interface, which lets you do all those fancy things. So they're really not restricting you in any way. And I heard we had some news that they added some new block storage too, Alan. When did that go live?
It went live a couple of weeks ago, but there's been in beta for a little while. So I've had access for a little bit longer. But yeah, so you can basically create these volumes starting as small as 1 gigabyte and up to 16 terabytes. And you can resize them on the fly, so you don't have to, just because you might need 16 terabytes later doesn't mean you have to make it now. So, and because you pay for how much you use, you can just keep it as small as you want and grow it as needed. And the other thing is you can detach it and move it to a different droplet. So if you get all the important files for your website or database, whatever, running on this, then when it comes time to do a major upgrade to the next version, it's, FreeBSD 11 coming out and is on DigitalOcean, you can just be like, okay, make a new 11, install, the web server and all my software stack again, and then I just move my persistent storage from the one droplet to the other, and website's up and it's upgraded to the latest version, and I didn't have to deal with trying to upgrade in place. Even though that's very easy on BSD, it's also very easy to just kind of like repave. Is what I like to do now with machines instead of trying to upgrade in place. It's just like start fresh, get all new everything.
That's really cool.
Yeah, and it's they have it's high availability, so it's always stored on a different machine from your actual droplet, and it's replicated between different racks in their data center, so that hardware failure is not going to take out your data.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, so it's really gives you better reliability and high availability than the little bit of storage you get with each droplet. So you combine that with that elastic IP feature. So you put your website on the elastic IP, and you get your 2 droplets running in different racks or even different. They have like multiple data centers in New York that are connected. And so on. So you get multiple droplets running in different places so they won't fail at the same time. And if one does go down, you move the persistent storage from that one to the backup one. The IP flips over because of the floating IP address, and now your website stays up.
Yeah, your service comes right back. That's really cool.
Yep.
Very nice. Well, DigitalOcean makes all this possible, and of course, you can do this today. Just go ahead and get signed up with an account. Of course, they have servers all over the world, so a lot of different locations to choose from. If you want something in New York, you can do that. We have Amsterdam and I guess Toronto now.
Yep.
London. I'm trying to remember Singapore. There's one in India
and
now.
Germany and San Francisco.
Germany and San Francisco. So there you go. So pick one closest to you, or maybe you're replicating something for far away. That's fine. You can do that too. They have a nice HTML5 speed tester too on their website, so you can see what's closest and what gives you the lowest latency. So good stuff. Anyway, if you talk to anyone over there, tell them you heard about it here on BSD Now. Okay, so let's talk about the news roundup here. So it looks like some videos from FOSDEM have now landed.
Yeah.
So what videos specifically?
All the ones from the BSD dev room. So the main talks from FOSDEM showed up very quickly, but every time I checked the videos from the dev room, like my talk and Baptiste's and John Sebastian's talk about the graphics stack on BSD, Roger Monet's talk about Zen, where he demoed live migration between Zen instances on FreeBSD using ZFS and all that. Those hadn't showed up yet. And so, I checked back periodically, but then I kind of forgot about it because they never showed up, and I figured maybe they wouldn't. But the other day when I was, I had mentioned the Zen replication thing in the Beehive chat room, and Michael Dexter went looking for it and found it. And I was like, oh, they're up now. So I checked, and so all the talks from the BSD dev room at FOSDEM, which was in January in Belgium. FOSDEM is the Free Open Source Developers European Meeting. And there were a bunch of really interesting talks. There was EdgeBSD, my interesting things you can do with ZFS, contributing to the graphic stack on FreeBSD, FreeBSD Zen update, including the demo of live migration and ZFS snapshots. There was a talk about Haiku OS and could it ever become a BSD. Bernard Spill talked about Open and Libre SSL on FreeBSD, talking about all the various bits of that. There was also a talk about ElectroBSD, if you're interested in that. And then Baptiste talked about reproducible builds for FreeBSD packages, which was the main reason he went to FOSDEM, was to talk to people from other operating systems about that.
So it looks like ElectroBSD is about reproducibility in the builds. That looks interesting.
And a bunch of interesting stuff. But all those videos are up. Okay. And also, if you click on any one of these talks here, they also have these slides so that you can follow along with the video.
Handy. That's definitely handy to open on the side there, so you can see a little clearer what they were talking about.
Because the camera's at the back of the room, so the slides aren't always that clear. So being able to follow along is quite handy.
Nice. Okay, we'll definitely check that out. Okay, so moving on, we have a FreeBSD on the Jetson TK1. So what is a more little ARM device?
Well, this one's actually not quite so little. So this is an NVIDIA ARM device.
Okay. Oh, you have one. Okay, we get a visual here.
Well, here's the box it came in. I guess I can take it out of the box. But so it's a little bit bigger than your standard Raspberry Pi. Oh, here's a spare one of my Pis. So I'll hold it up side by side so you can see the difference. But basically, it's a quad-core ARM device. It's got, it's NVIDIA's 4+1. I don't know what the actual +1 does, but it makes it faster. But basically, it's quad-core 2.3 gigahertz. So that's, fairly respectable speeds for a little embedded device, right?
Is it the quad cores and the +1 is the GPU?
Possibly.
With all the extra stuff?
So here's the device compared to a Raspberry Pi. Okay. So it's
a little bit
bigger, like 3.5 times or so.
Yeah.
But you get a lot more with that. On top of the quad-core 2.3 gigahertz CPU, you get an NVIDIA Kepler GPU with 192 CUDA cores. So while that's not, going to play the latest Call of Duty at max resolution, that's quite a bit. Like, that's enough to do multiple video transcodes and so on. It's got 2 gigabytes of DDR3, 16 megabytes of built-in eMMC storage. It's got one half-height mini PCIe slot, so that's here. So you can, add Wi-Fi or any device you want there. It's got a full-sized SD card reader. It's got an HDMI port. You got your serial. It's got the mini USB, but also a USB 3 somewhere here. Yeah. It's got serial, like I mentioned. It's got onboard Realtek audio, onboard Realtek gigabit LAN. It's also got a SATA port. So yeah, there's a SATA port here. There's the USB 3 port. So you can connect an actual hard drive. You have high-speed USB 3, real wired gigabit Ethernet, and it's got 4 megabyte boot flash. And this giant brick of expandable stuff. It has a connection for DP or LVDS display. It can do. It has a SPI connector for a touchscreen. It's got lots of GPIOs, more UARTs for serial, HSIC, I2C, so you can control other devices with it and so on, and the barrel power connector.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. This always just felt like kind of a beefed up tablet motherboard.
Yeah, so this is actually what they use in, I think, the what's NVIDIA Shield tablet or whatever.
Yeah.
So this is basically a beefed up board for a tablet designed for, to be built into a tablet. But this is the developer version that allows you to build something else with it and to
do custom stuff.
And also make it easier to actually develop something that's going to end up running on one of the tablets in the end. But they're $192, and you can get it directly from NVIDIA, or they have them on Amazon now as well.
Okay.
But the reason we bring up this story is that Alexander Timoshenko, who's at Gonzo at FreeBSD.org, has a post up on the Kernel Nomicon about actually getting it running FreeBSD. So here you can see it's actually connected up, and he's got his USB for the serial stuff. Ethernet serial and his an SSD hooked up to it. And he's got a nice little glass case for his. I should get one of those.
Yeah, I would like that. Those are nice.
And gets it booting FreeBSD. So I know people have been working on the drivers and stuff for a while, but they never really had a guide on how to get started with it. So he kind of walks us through a little bit of that. He says, first of all, his TK1 that he got didn't have U-boot. It had some other bootloader. It apparently depends on which version of Linux for Tegra came on yours, or basically when you ordered yours. He got his very early, so it has an older version. So his was Linux for Tegra R19, which had some non-U-boot bootloader. So he tried the tool that's supposed to come with that, which is actually for Linux, but he compiled it for FreeBSD since it uses libUSB. That should just work. And he tried it, and it just gave him a kind of vague error message. So he fell back to trying it from Ubuntu and got the same error message. So therefore, it wasn't his fault. It was actually something not working. So then he basically found the newer firmware, R21.4, and flashed that onto it, and now it has U-boot. So then the post walks through the steps to PXE boot FreeBSD onto it. So there's a GitHub repo where you have a version of FreeBSD with the patches to work here. It's got more patches at the in a link in his home directory at the top of the thing there. But basically, you compile a little Jetson TK1 kernel and then set it up for PXE boot. Boot up the device when the U-boot loader starts. You tell it, hey, get a DHCP address, and then boot, and it does. And he's got all the scripts in here to do it and everything. And you end up with FreeBSD running. And he actually goes through building a custom version of U-boot that has more features so that you can use the U-boot loader as well. And so it walks through all that and getting that on the device. So this is basically everything you get to make your NVIDIA Jetson TK1 much more useful and bootable and running FreeBSD.
That's pretty
We'll have to wait for the next post to go the one step further, which is actually burning FreeBSD into the device so that you don't have to network boot it. But right now, if you follow all the guide he's got here, you can have it reliably network booting so that you don't have to type anything to do it. It'll just start up and run FreeBSD every time. You just power it on, and eventually you'll get to the login prompt with no interaction.
I need to grab one of those. That seems like a good device to play with.
Yeah. Hopefully he'll have instructions coming up at some point so that you can have it boot FreeBSD without having to be on the network.
That's very cool.
That'll be very nice.
Okay. Well, cool. Yeah, definitely keep us up to date with that. That's really good stuff.
Yeah, so I've had one of these for a while now, and then I found the GitHub repo that had some of the patches for the device drivers and so on, but I never really had the stuff I needed to get started with it. And now that that's there, I'm very happy.
Yeah, this gets you at least really close to it. So the network boot part's a little annoying, but at least you can get to it.
When it's sitting on my bench, that's fine. It's if I wanted to use it for something else, it'd be a little more of a problem.
Sure. That's pretty cool. Okay, well, let's move on here. So we got some more OpenBSD news this week. We have Vidiguard, which wrote an article about why they use OpenBSD. So first of all, who they are a company that makes autonomous drone solutions for security monitoring. But you wouldn't think, why are they talking about OpenBSD? But believe it or not, they did. And first of all, they started by mentioning while they're in business to provide physical security, they just as equally value their data security, especially customer data, of course. So in this article where they talk about why they're using OpenBSD, they name 4 specific features that matter to them, starting with uncompromising quality and security. So they mentioned that over the past 20 years, OpenBSD's focus on uncompromising quality and code correctness has yielded an operating system second to none. Code auditing and review is core to the project's developmental process. The team focus on security includes integrated cryptography, new security mitigation techniques, and an optional security is no security stance, making it arguably the most secure operating system available today. This approach pays off in the form of only a few security updates for a given release compared to other operating systems that might release a handful of updates every week. That's pretty good. High praise indeed. They also, of course, mentioned some of the other factors that swayed them over in that direction was the sane defaults out of box, which was a good one. Documentation, and of course, last but not least, is the license. Of course, that BSD license makes a huge difference.
Ultra permissive, they said. Well, OpenBSD is mostly the ISC license now, but it's equivalent, basically, just slightly different wording.
Sure, but still makes it super important for businesses making this kind of decision. But of course, we want to say thanks to Vidiguard for actually publicly detailing their use of BSD. I hope we see other businesses follow suit, because that's one thing.
Yes.
I know we've mentioned this at conferences and whatnot, but it's like BSD is kind of like the best kept secret out there. There's a lot of people using it who don't say anything, right? I don't know if they think it's a competitive advantage or whatever, but it is good to see more businesses being open about why they're using a particular BSD and how so.
Yeah, well, I think part of it also is it just works and you don't have to think about it.
That's right. That is true. That is true. Okay, so next up here, if you've been around the BSD community for pretty much any length of time right now, you've no doubt heard of Dru Lavigne, or maybe you own one of her books. But she was recently interviewed by Luca Ferrari for the BSD magazine, and you may find it quite a fascinating read. But interestingly enough, I found that the second question sounded kind of like we were asking her the question, because they asked her, how'd you get into BSD? So I just wanted to read some of her responses here. She says, in the mid-90s, I went back to school to learn network and system administration. As graduation grew near and I started to look for work, I noticed that all the interesting jobs wanted Unix skills. Wanting to increase my skills and not having any money, I did an internet search for free Unix, and the first hit was freebsd.org. I went to the website, started reading the handbook, and thought, I can do this. Since I only had access to one computer and wanted to ramp up my skills quickly, I printed out the installation and networking chapters of the handbook. I replaced the current operating system with FreeBSD and forced myself to learn how to do everything I needed to do on that computer in FreeBSD. It was a painful and scary few weeks as I figured out how to do the transition of the family's workflow to FreeBSD, but it was also exhilarating to learn that, yes, I can do this. Since then, I've had the opportunity to try out or administer the other BSDs, several Linux distros, SCO, and Solaris. She said, I found the layout, logic, and release engineering process of the BSD makes the most sense to me, and I'm happiest when I'm on a BSD system. That's definitely a good answer. Dru also had a really good response to when asked what challenges maybe potential new Unix or BSD users may face. So she said, students who haven't been exposed to open source before are used to thinking of technology in terms of pre-purchasable brand consisting of black boxes that are just supposed to work without having to think about how they work. You can and should slow down and learn how things work. It can be a mind shift to learn that the freedom to use and change how something works does exist, and it isn't considered stealing. And that learning of how something works, while hard, can be fun. BSD culture in particular is well suited for those who have the time and the temperament to dive into how things work. With over 40 years of freely available source and commit messages, you can dive as deep as you want into learning how things came to be, how they evolved over the years, and how they work now, and how they can be improved. There is a diverse range of stuff to choose from user tools to networking to memory management to hardware drivers to security mechanisms and so on. There's also a culture of sharing and learning and encouragement for users who demonstrate that they've done their homework and have their own ideas to contribute. So actually, the interview is quite long. I only read a few small portions of it, but Dru provides a lot of fantastic insights into more aspects of the BSD community in general. So definitely worth your time to read. I would encourage you to check that out when you get a chance. I know a lot of our listeners listen in the car, so wait till you stop. Don't pull it up on your cell phone.
That would be bad.
That would be bad and illegal in most states or most places. So, but definitely when you're sitting at your desk and have a chance to read that, it's quite a well-written, good article. So take a look at that. We would encourage you to check it out.
Her other big recommendation is find a BSD conference and go to it.
That's true. Yeah, we can't recommend that enough either. I mean, at least go to one. If you can't get to Canada because it's too far, well, maybe you can go to the one out in California.
Yeah, we have we have Meet BSD coming up. That's in November. And then I've seen they've already started planning and holding polls on Twitter about VBSDCon. It's like, would you rather stay at the cheaper hotel and have to take a shuttle to get to the entertainment district, or at the more expensive hotel, but it's right in the entertainment district? And I'm like, well, I'm fine with the cheaper hotel.
Sure.
But I know some people like the entertainment.
Yeah, it is nice. It is convenient to be able to walk to stuff.
Yeah, but I know VBSDCon last year, I didn't leave the hotel until the conference was over. Some people like that, some people don't.
Well, we drove up this last year, so we had a car, and we were able to get around a little easier. But yeah, if you're flying in, definitely you may want to vote on that. See what matters more to you. Okay, we're going to get right into the beastie bits here in just a second, where we're going to rapid fire some stories at you. But before we do, we want to mention another sponsor this week, which of course is going to be IX Systems. Website for that, ixsystems.com/BSDNow, where you can go and put your information in there so you can download their free guide to what you need to look for when you're purchasing a new server for open source, what kind of questions to ask your vendor. And it's good background. If you've done this before and you're a pro, then you already know you should be using IX. I mean, that's obvious. If you've been any kind of listener around here, you've heard us talking about them for years now. But definitely get in touch with those folks. Tell them what your next project is. What are you building? Are we doing storage today? Are we doing servers? Do you need a little FreeNAS Mini to go underneath your desk? I mean, there's a lot of different things IX can do, and they can build all kinds of custom solutions from those tiny systems all the way ramped up to some monsters we've seen in the past. So we'll have to get some pictures again down the road with next big build they do like that.
Even just me personally for work have bought everything from a little 1U short depth router with no hard drives, just like a USB stick inside the installed on the motherboard. So that was very inexpensive, quiet. It's only this deep, and it's my router, and it's got 4 gigabit ports. Through to I bought giant 250-pound servers with 36 helium-filled hard drives in it.
Wow.
Is whether you want to buy one little tiny router or one FreeNAS Mini, or if you want to buy that TrueNAS that's an entire rack. It's just an entire rack of hard drives with dual controller heads for high availability. Or if you're somebody bought was it 300 1 and 2U servers with 256 gigs of RAM each? It's they treat you just as well when you're buying one little tiny server versus if you're buying 300 of them.
That's right. And no job's pretty much too crazy. I mean, we've seen them over the years, systems with just gobs of memory, all the memory expanders. We've showed you pictures of that, to the one system with how many NICs in it again?
Yeah.
I can't even remember.
There was one that there were 24 10 gigabit NICs or something like that.
Yeah. So they can build some pretty crazy stuff. So if they can build stuff like that, if you have a more common job, give them a call. That way you can get something specific to what you need, and they'll help you figure out where you can best spend your money to get you the most performance out of it, and not just sell you, well, we have this on the shelf. This might work for you. No. They're going to ask you, what are you doing? And then understand things like, okay, I'm going to be running a big database server or serving this, a bunch of NFS files. Well, how many files? Is it a lot of big ones? Is it small ones? How do we want to set up the ZFS on there?
It makes a big difference there, having that knowledge.
It's a big deal that they even know what to ask. It's definitely good stuff. So check them out today. And of course, if you're a customer at IX and you're a listener to the show, if you have a story you want to share about that, maybe get in touch with us. We like to read those kind of things out when we get them. Yep. Okay, so let's move into the beastie bits. So first up, Ed Mast over at the FreeBSD project is seeking testers of the without GPL DTC program.
Yeah, so this is a setting. So in FreeBSD, they've had a BSD licensed version of DTC, which is the device tree compiler, which is something you need for embedded boards where you compile the device tree description down into the binary format that's actually used to boot the device. So it was using a BSD licensed one for a long time. But then some new features started being used in these description files by new vendors. And so to be compatible with those, they had to switch to the GPL licensed DTC. Since then, the FreeBSD or the BSD licensed one has been brought up to date to support those new features. And so they would like people to test compiling with the flag without GPL DTC to switch back to the BSD one and make sure it works for them before they flip that back to being the default. But this is part of the FreeBSD project's focus on removing all GPL stuff in time for FreeBSD 12.0, which will be 2 years from now. Okay. So, yes, if you do anything where you compile your own stuff for ARM or MIPS and so on, do set this flag, try it out, and make sure it works, and report if not. But he does ask that people report if it does work as well, because,
well, that's good feedback to have too. But otherwise, you just think nobody's trying.
Yeah, exactly. Basically, if he doesn't hear anybody... if he doesn't hear back from anybody, he assumes nobody tried it, not that it worked for everybody, which is always the problem. So,
sure. Okay, well, next up we have PAM Mastery. Michael W. Lucas looks like he has a new book heading out here soon. He's looking for tech reviewers of that. So we have a link to that in the show notes here. So you may need to take a look at that if you're somebody who's got some familiarity with PAM and could assist in a tech review. Let him know. He said, with luck, the book's going to be available around September-ish. So maybe you can help make that happen faster. So get in touch with Michael. He said he needs feedback by Monday, August 8th. So that's about 4 weeks.
Well, that was then. That post is...
Has he changed it since then?
The post is a week old. So now you only have 2 weeks until August 4th.
That's right. It's coming soon.
Yep.
So again, see if you can get in touch with them really quick.
If you've had to suffer through PAM before and know a little bit about it, you'd be a great person to review this.
There you go. Okay, so next up we have OpenSense 16.7. It looks like an RC2 has just been released. And it looks like this does bring some major changes here. It looks like they've added Intel's Hyperscan library to speed up Suricata rule matching. They've added UEFI boot support. It also brings some language packs to their correct state, and they've had Japanese completed again. So that's good. Looking at some of their changes. Looks like firmware is always fetched to persistent storage. So they added installer options for GPT UEFI mode.
Restart all DNS services if the interface is reloaded. Properly configure OpenVPN interfaces to start at boot up. A bunch of things like that.
Okay, so that's good stuff. So definitely check that out and go ahead and grab your latest OpenSense. Okay, so what is this one? Jupyter Notebook for bootstrapping an Arduino on FreeBSD. What are they doing? More cool little embedded devices.
Yes, so they
no pictures, unfortunately.
This is for people who want to build Arduino sketches on FreeBSD. So I guess Jupyter Notebook is a program for drawing sketches of what you're going to do with your Arduino. Or for people who want to learn more about continuous integration using Arduino. If you're running FreeBSD. So this is the Arduino and Arduino MK packages imports are out of date. A lot of the features have been added in the newer versions of Arduino, and having a portable installer makes it easy to just build from NFS mounts. Plus, it works for his ZFS-backed FreeNAS machine. So this tutorial walks through actually building out the Arduino stuff from the latest versions on GitHub.
Okay. I need to check that out. Okay, so the design and implementation of the AnyKernel and rump kernels. So we had a second edition book, which has landed as well. And if you're curious and interested in rump kernels, I know somebody in Texas Linux Fest even asked me about that. And I said, just what we've talked about on the show is really all I know about it. But this would be a good way if you want to dig deeper and see what's going on with the future of rump kernels and unikernels.
Yes, maybe we'll have to
check this out.
Reach out to Ante Conte again and see if he can't come talk to us again.
Yeah, well, especially now that we've seen some things pop up on GitHub, like running a single unikernel running a specific process in a jail, in a VM. That's actually kind of neat. So we may need to talk a little bit more about that down the road. But it looks like you can donate for it and then download the guide there. Very cool. Yeah, the book's available free of charge. Should have mentioned that. But definitely donate it donate to it if you find it interesting. We need to support authors who work hard on this kind of stuff.
Yes.
Okay, so last up, this is one I found fascinating. Maybe another week I would have done a full story on this one, but talking about a project on GitHub where they're using Unison and FreeBSD jails to provide X jails. So in other words, you want to take a look. They have all the code there. It looks like there are some custom patches you have to do to the system, which allows you to run Xorg in a jail, because that doesn't work out of box by default. But essentially what it lets you do is sync multiple computers in multiple locations. So for example, you log into a jail and run your X and do your desktop session or whatever, and when you're done, it will sync that over to a master server. So you can choose whether you want to push your changes or not push your changes or whatever. So when you go to a new system and log in, it'll pull the latest from your top level server, and you can do your desktop session again, which I could see how that would be handy. I guess this kind of would work around doing like NFS mounts for home.
Right, well, especially since it could probably work not necessarily over a LAN, but it could work, send it to your laptop, go to a conference, come back, and then send it back to your desktop.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty neat idea. So, man, I wonder if they could package this up somehow, turn it into a program and make it a little easier to deploy. But either way, it looks pretty interesting. Yes. I was looking, they have patches against FreeBSD 10.2 and 10.3. Looks like it's just a pretty minor patch. Maybe the diff is 20 lines changed.
Oh, that's pretty low.
Or so. Yeah, it's not bad at all. It's mostly in the DRM bits, which I'm sure may be a little stale, and it looks like a little bit in the kernel jail stuff as well. Then it allows you to run X in a jail. I think it just gives access to dev KMan.
It changes the access check to check whether you can write, not whether you're allowed to load a driver or something like that. Fairly.
But either way, it adds the allow KMem option to the jail flags as well. I wonder if that's something we should have down the road to give people the option to do that. Anyway, very neat idea. It's cool running X in a jail. So check it out if that's something you'd like to play around with. Okay, we got feedback and questions to get to, but before we do, real quick, let's mention our last sponsor this week, which is going to be Tarsnap. Website for that, tarsnap.com/BSDNow, where you want to go and create an account right away if you haven't already. If you have, good for you. You're awesome, and keep doing what you're doing. But if you haven't, you need to get hooked up with Tarsnap right now and start doing your backups in a safe, secure, and fully encrypted manner. Again, how many backup solutions out there are going to give you all the source code to a cool product like this where it's actually fully encrypted? None of the ones that I know of anyway. But you'll want to check it out because Tarsnap has clients for just about everything under the sun. So, of course, you can be running Linux, Windows, Mac, BSDs, etc. And you can use Tarsnap to back up all your important bits. But the cool part is, since that key never leaves your local box, only you have access to that. So the people on the other end, people who have access to the cloud, administrators, people who work for Tarsnap, they don't know what your data is. All they see is garbage as you back up. So definitely want to check that out and start doing your backup safely. I know, Alan, you use it. I use it. It's pretty darn cheap, too. We're talking pico dollars or pico bytes per, I forget what the current calculation is.
Pico dollars per byte month.
Yeah, it's darn cheap. So anyway, check it out today. And of course, you don't want to wait until after you've lost data because at that point it's too late. So you want to get set up now. Think about it ahead of time. You'll thank us later. Anything else you want to add?
No, just they have a page up there now full of helper scripts. So if you want to do something a little more advanced, there's like a Tarsnap manager, Tarsnap generations, or Axe, another calendar-based Tarsnap script, which is a very portable bin.sh script that rotates through 31 daily archives, 12 monthly archives, and an indefinite number of yearly archives. Also supports pre-backup and post-backup scripts so that you can, snapshot your database or something before you do the backup.
Oh, good stuff. Good stuff. Check it out today, folks. Okay, so let's get into our questions. So first up this week, we have Eric writing in. He says, I have a FreeNAS Mini, and one of its main jobs is to serve my son's videos. I'm having to convert a lot of old .avi files, and I'd love to be able to produce a report showing me how often he watches them so I could prioritize and ignore the ones he never watches. Is there some way to do this in FreeBSD or maybe FreeNAS in particular, what he's using here? He said, thanks, love the show, and gradually understand more and more of it each week. So this is an interesting one. Me and Alan were talking a little bit about it before we started the segment here, but using native tools, there's a couple ways maybe you could do it, like tracking the A time or whatever, but even that's subject to error possibly depending on how you're accessing.
But I guess it would help you find the ones that he definitely didn't touch. ZFS has a property called A time, which the default is on, but the FreeBSD installer that I wrote turns it off. And I think FreeNAS turns it off as well, and PCBSD does. So you'd have to turn it back on for specifically the one data set. And so basically in the metadata of each file, Unix keeps track of the time the file was created, also called the birth time, when it was last modified, and optionally when it was last accessed. Normally that's turned off because having to write to the disk every time somebody reads a file, it kind of hurts performance.
A little expensive, right?
But also if you have a lot of snapshots, then you have to keep the old access time and the new access time. And if you're keeping a lot of snapshots, basically every time you touch a file, you make all those snapshots get bigger. And the whole point of the snapshots is they don't cost you space if you don't change the file, but they do if you have access times turned on. But if you turn that on, then you could use the find command and then -a time, -7d would list every file that's been accessed in the last 7 days. Or you could do it the reverse and give me a list of things that haven't been accessed for the last 10 days by doing +10 or something. And so then it could help you find files that have been accessed recently or that haven't been accessed recently. The downside is that I imagine, depending what your son's using to access the videos, if, for example, Windows, if you open a directory full of videos, it reads them all to figure out how long they are and to generate a little thumbnail. And that could throw off those access time numbers. I wonder if...
I'm not sure what other way you do that.
I don't know if anybody in the audience has a better way. I imagine maybe you could make Samba log as it was being accessed or something, but that doesn't seem that would probably have the same problem with Windows doing it.
You'd almost need something on the client side to keep track of it or whatever, because if you're talking through Samba... I don't know. This is a tricky
somebody
one.
In the audience.
How on the FreeNAS side? Yeah, how on the FreeNAS side would you keep track of that?
Yeah, it'd be pretty difficult, other than if Samba could log or something. But even then, it'd be...
Well, even then, all it might report is, yes, something accessed me, but maybe not whether it was played or not, just a little bit of it was read to create a thumbnail. So, interesting problem. But if anybody else in the audience has an idea or suggestion on how you would track this, I'd like to hear it, because that's a good question. You stumped us.
It's a perfectly reasonable question that I don't have a good answer to.
That's right. Okay, so next up we have Rob Roy writes in. He says, hi, Chris and Alan. I've heard that when ZFS is backed by storage systems with their own write cache, such as a normal SAN storage array, failing to disable that cache can lead to ZFS corruption. What I'm curious about is what makes ZFS different from other file systems in this regard. I understand that if the write cache's contents lost, any file system's idea of what's on the disk and what's actually on the disk may be at odds. Yet this situation is not deemed risky enough with traditional file systems to warrant disabling the write cache. Also, if an array won't allow write cache to be disabled on a per LU basis, and one's not willing to disable the write cache for the whole array, should the array simply not be used for ZFS? Are there any alternatives? Thanks to the Megamax, Rob Roy.
All
right.
ZFS... it won't lead to ZFS corruption. ZFS would just roll back to the last Uber block that wasn't corrupt. So it could just lead to slightly more data being rolled back than normal. But yeah, so the bigger problem isn't so much if the device has a write cache, is if the device lies. So a lot of these devices, because file systems that are set, when you have a database and it tries to do an fsync or whatever on a file and says, don't tell me it's done until it's written all the way to the disk.
Sure.
A lot of these controllers will lie as soon as it's in the write cache to speed things up. But ZFS really depends on when it says to the hardware, sync this to the disk. I've already lied to the user program for you, that it actually gets written. And so...
Sure.
It's better if you can disable it, but don't let that stop you from using ZFS. But yeah, sure. ZFS will just...
The other benefits far outweigh that.
If it is corrupted, ZFS will just walk back and one transaction group and be fine. So it could cause you to lose up to 5 seconds more data, but it's not going to cause your whole pool to just disappear.
Okay. Very cool. Well, thanks for writing in. We appreciate that. So next up is Lewis, who writes in, says, hello, Chris and Alan, longtime TechSnap listener. Alan introduced me to BSD and TechSnap a few months ago, and I started listening to BSD Now and went back to the entire catalog. He says, now I'm hooked on this podcast, too.
That's a lot of catalog.
That's a binge watching. That's like weeks of binge watching.
It's like 300 and something hours.
Yeah.
Maybe not quite that much, but a lot.
Cool. That's really nice. We have more content than most major TV series and stuff at this point. So very good. Okay, so he says, I assembled a FreeNAS box. My case has 16 3.5-inch hard drive slots. It has 4 horizontal boards with one SF8087 plug each and connects to a 4-disk hot plug row. So I bought 2 PCIe LSIs, 8-port, 6 gigabyte SAS, and then let's see, various host bus adapters that have the 2 connectors, so I can plug 4x2 of the hard drives each. He said, I also bought 4 of the 3 terabyte Western Digital RAIDs, so I have the first case full row completed and created a pool of 4 drives in a RAID Z2. I have not put it into production, so I have no data, no jails, no users, no plugins on anything yet. He said it's only running FreeNAS OS. My goal is to run Windows shares and network backup for my company and also install a few services from the plugin page. He said I cannot do it from the CLI. Things like OwnCloud, BT Sync, Crash Plan, etc. within the LAN. So he said, my questions are, if the LSI HBA fails, do I lose data? Or will the machine just stop working? Should I have an extra card laying around?
So if the card dies... You won't lose data, but you'll lose access to the data until you can plug it into a card that does work. The nice thing about ZFS versus using hardware RAID is that you can import it if you connect the drives to anything else. Whereas, if you use the LSI RAID on the more expensive version of the card you bought, and then tried to plug it into an Adaptec card, it wouldn't work. But with ZFS, it will, because ZFS's metadata is portable, whereas the hardware RAID metadata is, sometimes even more specific than per manufacturer, but per series of cards. As far as I've never had one die, so I don't know if you really need to keep one laying around. If your data is that important, then if you get the enterprise SAS drives, they have a feature called dual porting, where you can actually connect each of those hot swap bay things you have will actually have two connectors, and you connect it to two different cards and do what's called multipath. And then if one of the cards dies, all the traffic just goes to the other card, and you can survive such a failure. That's what I have in my more expensive servers, but I don't bother in my cheaper servers because it's never actually happened, and I'm not that worried about it.
Sure, and you just replicate it again if it does, right? Very cool. He says, so question number 2, how do I make backups from this machine? When it'll be full, I have 4 RAID Z2 groups, 3 terabytes per disk minimum, so no external hard drive I know will have that much storage.
Yeah, so backing up,
You gotta find some place
you got to find somewhere that has enough space to back that all up. It's obviously, quite a big problem. I basically ended up having to buy 2 of the machines and then back up to the second one.
I mean, you can replicate to a smaller pool if you're not using
the nice thing about
if you're only using 10% of your RAID Z2.
The other nice thing with ZFS replication is you can do it per data set. So if you split your data up on that giant system into smaller chunks, you can back up each one to a different external hard drive or something to that effect.
Sure. All right, question number 3. Should every 4 disks in group 1 be added to a column in this case? So I add so for each VDEV, I add to the pool has 1 disk from each of the ports that I use on the LSI HBA.
If you do that, especially if you have multiple HBAs, it will help you survive the loss of one of those. That can be a better way to do it. However, depending on your setup, like it looks like you're going to eventually have the 16 drives, but maybe you don't yet. Then not doing that could allow you to possibly, not have to buy the second LSI card yet. But if you already have, then so yes, doing them in columns like that does provide you an advantage and can also load balance the traffic over your cards. And ensure that if one of those cables is what gives out on you, then you lose one device from each VDEV and you can keep running versus not.
So you can repair it.
It also helps in the case where one drive stalls and messes up all of its neighbors that are on the same connection, and you get that advantage. So yes, the columns are the best way to go there.
Cool. He said, I've read that I should also have 1 or 2 SSDs for a ZIL and ARC. What is this for and will I need it? The motherboard has 6 SATA connectors. I'm only using 1 for the DVD. So should I use any of these SATA and install the OS on an SSD or mirrored SSDs since I have 4 or 6 of the new 30 gig drives instead of using a USB thumb drive? Give it the most you can.
So for a ZIL, you only need that if you're running databases or a lot of NFS that has synchronous writes. If you're just storing large files and so on the machine, then the ZIL will be wasted. And then for L2 ARC, that's a read cache. It really depends if you need that much more performance. Again, if it's all just big files that you're not accessing that often and you're reading in a straight line, then your existing drives will be able to saturate the network. But if it's a lot of very small files or if you're running VMs off of it, then the L2 ARC can help you. And, for VMs, the ZIL will help as well.
Okay. Very good. Well, we wish you luck with your FreeNAS build, and hopefully that system works out really well for you.
Okay. So the next one is from Emmett, who's asking about some Python stuff. He says, I'm a Python developer, and I just wanted to add to the question about Python packages. It has always been possible to install Python packages through pip into a virtual env and keep the system packages as clean as possible. If you're using Python 3.3 or higher, you can use the built-in VM package to set up your virtual environment. This just works just like virtual env, but doesn't need a third-party package to be installed. If the package does need to be installed system-wide, such as UWSGI or GUnicorn or Salt, Ansible, etc., for your web hosting or management or whatever, you might want to use pip outside of the virtual env. This will allow you to install a spastic version of the package. I think that's a reference to a specific Python thing. I don't know. Otherwise, I don't know what he means.
Sure.
The spastic version of the package and update it when you want and not when the package maintainer does the update there. You also can use pip to install a package directly from a website or GitHub or local folder or whatever. If your system also needs to have multiple versions of Python 3 and Python 2.7 or whatever, you can have a pip for all of them on one system without the risk of stepping on each other with pip 2.7 and pip 3.4 and 3.5, etc. Then when you need to use a specific version for Python in your scripts or application, you can use the shebang to declare the version at the top of your script and use that specific version of Python.
Sure.
And he's got links to some extra documentation here.
He actually sent a lot of links over, kind of showing examples of how to do this. So, yeah, that's good. Thank you for following up with us. I know that was in response to a question we had a couple weeks ago. Okay, so last up, I'll let you read this one too. We got Peter writes in about multicast jails.
Now you're getting fancy.
I know,
Says,
right?
I've been listening to this show and others for ages now, and slowly but surely moving my home servers from Linux and Windows to FreeNAS, and trying to consolidate bits and pieces into one server from all the other servers and NASs. Very successfully and very happy, thanks to the power of FreeNAS. So I have a solar battery system with an inverter that broadcasts data over my network, and I reverse engineered the protocol and wrote a C# console app to read all of the data so I can save it to a database. He says, I got Mono installed in the jail, which is standard vimage, no NAT, and the app works great. The only problem is that the jail does not receive UDP unicast. So I think he meant broadcast because he says UDP packets sent to 255.255.255.255. So that's broadcast. Unicast is a message sent from one IP to another IP. Broadcast is one IP to every IP, and multicast is one IP to a group of people that is subscribed. It says, in this packet, the inverter sends back its IP address so I can bind to it and read data on another port. I have to specify the IP specifically, and my app skips the UDP unicast query process and just goes on and works merrily on its way. Do you happen to know a fix to this issue with jails retrieving broadcast and multicast? It depends how you are connecting your vimage jail to the network. I don't know what FreeNAS does by default. Do you? Is it a bridge?
Yeah, by default it has vimage on. I think it exposes VPF inside it for doing DHCP over vimage.
Right, but
I don't think the firewall is used in any way.
Right, so
that would be an issue.
If the E pair is just bridged to the network, it should get broadcast, right?
I think so. I don't know. That seems like a good question. First of all, maybe to ask on the FreeNAS forums, or maybe even the bug tracker. Yeah. We may actually have to have one of our plugin guys take a look at that and see how the internals. I don't even know off the top of my head.
Well, if BPF is exposed, you can run TCP dump in a jail. You could use TCP dump and see if you're actually getting that, and maybe compare and make sure you're getting it on the host on the.
Make sure it's showing up on the host interface.
Yeah, but you mentioned multicast. I don't know if that was just a mistake or if it's actually using multicast. That might be slightly more complicated. I don't know if there's a special setting or something you have to do to a bridge to pass the multicast through it. I don't really deal with multicast very often. I don't use multicast very often. Outside of routers, I don't know anything that uses it except for some old-fashioned video streaming stuff for LANs.
Well, like DLNA and stuff. I think they use it for Plex, that plugin specifically, and there might be another one using it too. But that's a good enough question. I think I would maybe even open up a bug on that, on the bug tracker, or again the forums, and just ask if anybody else has run into that, and just so I can ping the right people and see, hey, who knows how that works internally, how the jails get set up on FreeNAS. But that was another fellow wrote that. That was our hacked version of Warden. So I'll have to ask. John Hickson wrote that, so I'll have to ask him how that works. Okay, well, anyway, we'll dig into that. But definitely send us another message out of band, like I said, on the FreeNAS bug ticket system or on the forums, and we'll see if we can get an answer for you one way or another. Okay, well, actually, that makes it time to close out the show for the week. So, of course, as we're wrapping up here, we're going to mention to you, we're, of course, looking for interviews. So if you know of anyone who's available or who should have been on here and hasn't yet, maybe they're shy, first of all, tell them it's not that bad. We're not scary. We're really nice to talk to. So it's time to come on and just do an interview. Tell us about what you're using and what you're doing on BSD. So to do that, send us feedback over at feedback@bsdnow.tv. So, and that's not just for interviews. If you have questions, if you have comments, if you see a show idea or some topic or something floating around the net,
stories that we didn't cover or stuff we should know about.
That's right. So we try and keep an internal document here of all the stories like, ooh, we need to mention that next week. And sometimes we don't get to them all, but send it to us anyway, because there's just so much out on the net now. We can't keep track of it all, right? So you got to send it to us to make sure that it gets put in the show doc and then it gets included in a future episode. And again, send that to feedback@bsdnow.tv. Don't do YouTube comments or don't just send it to Reddit and assume that we're going to see it. So, right, you got to send it one place so we can keep track of it all. Anyway, we appreciate that, and we'll be back next week with another live episode, and we'll look forward to talking to you then.